It's easy for me to be in a fucking strange land by myself. I am more than happy to be alone, more than happy to be the only white person in a city in the backwaters of Myanmar.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the life. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rain. The first thing I met was a fly with a buzz and the sky with no clouds. The heat was hot and the ground was dry, but the air was full of sound. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, because there ain't no one for to give you no pain. After 2 days in the desert sun, my skin began to turn red. After 3 days in the desert fun, I was looking at a riverbed, and the story it told of a river that flowed made me sad to think it was dead. You see, I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no pain. After 9 days, I let the horse run free, 'cause the desert had turned to sea. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rings. The ocean is a desert with its life underground and the perfect disguise above. Under the cities lies a heart made of brown, but the humans will give no love. You see, I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no pain.
Of the Just Passing Through podcast, and it is the 25th of January 2024. Another one for New Year. I've just got under the wire before January finishes. I haven't been around for a bit because I have had to search out some work that starts around March time. I'm leaving the job I'm at now. But I cannot say anything about it at the moment. But I guarantee the first podcast I drop in April, I will be shitting on people. So mark that in your calendar. Right, today, what I'm going to talk to you today about is when you get to a certain age and you're an expat. Now, I am 2 months shy of 53. 2 months shy of 53, and I have been an expat now for 22 years. 22 years full time. I dallianced with it when I were in my teens and then again in my 20s. But I ended up getting dragged back to the UK, to fucking Bradford, just to save up some money so I could get out in the world again. Now, the thing about being an expat is it's fantastic. It is fantastic, but it's not for everybody. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is why I ended up doing it, why you should do it, why you shouldn't do it. And when you get up there in the mid to high numbers, how it all changes. So first of all, you've heard me going on about my hometown. It's, for some people, it's fucking heaven. For some people, it's heaven. It works for them. And Bradford does work for some people. England does work for some people. Works for a lot of people. It just didn't work for me. Looking around, the fucking weather. I remember looking out my bedroom window, I'm like, fucking hell, it's winter again. Am I here for another year? And then 12 months later, fucking hell, it's winter again. I've been here another year. And I always had the feeling that time were fucking passing by pretty fucking quick. And I wasn't doing out, and I was still here under them grey skies, under them grey fucking council skies. So when you decide, I've got to get off, you've just got to start saving. You've got to not answer that phone when your friends ring up to go out for a pint. You've got to give up those weekends. You don't go on holiday. In fact, my advice to somebody that's in the late teens, early 20s is plan to go on your trip or to start your trip at the end of February or the start of March. So then that, as you saving from September, you've got all the partying out of you in the summer, and then you've got the autumn and the winter and a little bit of the spring to just save up and get that flight. It gives you 6 months to sort yourself out a job somewhere, unless you want to find a job somewhere instead of going travelling. It just gives you those party months of June, July, August to get it all out of your system. Now, what you've got to think is, when you're in them summer months in the UK, you just think to yourself, look, in the winter in December, I can be somewhere like Thailand. I can be somewhere like Australia where it's their summer. And I can be walking about in the clothes I'm in now at Christmas. And that will keep you going. And just save and save and save. And don't be swayed by any outward influences trying to get you out there to concerts. You'll get to see these bands in concert again. I mean, I gave up going to watch Black Rebel Motorcycle Club in, I think they were playing in Leeds. And then 6 months later, I'm watching them in Sydney. Watching the same band in Sydney, and I met them at Red Eye Records in the middle of Sydney because they were doing an album signing, and because they were so much bigger in the UK, they could never have done that. But here they were in Sydney, they just racked up, just three lads. Met them, they signed the album, and went to see them that night in Sydney. Walking back to my flat in Darlinghurst, just strolling back, there's the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the Opera House. I walked through the Botanic Gardens, and then I were up into Darlinghurst and back to my apartment. That is what I saved up for. It's what I saved up for. I've met a couple of expats that were like, just, shall we say, playing at it. They'll go away for a few years, but they're always talking about how good it is back home. And it is, I suppose, for some people it is, and I suppose some people miss home. But even as a kid, I could never understand the attraction. I could never understand why people stayed there. I suppose if we'd have lived in Cornwall or somewhere nice down south, maybe a bit coast, I would have stayed. But nah, it was fucking grim. So getting out was always the top of the list of priorities for me. Even when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, that was the thing. In my head was, I've got to travel and I've got to get away from here. It had its fucking hooks in me. You get away, you get dragged back, you get away, you get dragged back. And then the third time, I left myself no lifeboat. I left myself no lifeboat whatsoever. I sold my house. I sold everything. So I would have nothing to come back to. Nothing to come back to. And off I went. 1 month's time, on the 28th of February, I will have been away for 22 years. I left on the 28th of February 2002 from Manchester. I flew to Frankfurt. I had a few hours in Frankfurt airport and then off to Bangkok. And that were it. My feet have never been in England full time for that many years. And I am a happier man for it. Now, what you've got to remember is when you are an expat, what you've got to give up and what you gain. Now, what you give up is all your friends. You give up all of your friends. You're not going to be with them anymore. That's the only way I can put it. Now, if you've got a couple of good friends, they will fly out and see you wherever you are. They'll make time and come out and see you. A few have been over here. Not as many as I've liked, but a few have. No family have been out. Even when I was living in, I spent 3 years in Spain. My dad came out to see me in Spain, but other than that, no other members of the family have been out to visit. That being said, I'm the fucking black sheep. I'm the black sheep of that family. Fucking square peg. Square peg in a round hole. I don't know if it's because we've got no blood ties or anything like that, but never apart, really. Never felt a part of that family. So that is an advantage for me. That were a real advantage for me for being an expat. It's easy for me to be in a fucking strange land by myself. I am more than happy to be alone. More than happy to be the only white person in a city in the backwaters of Myanmar. That is where I'm at my happiest. The very, very north of Hokkaido in Japan on a bicycle. I did not see a fucking foreigner for 9 or 10 days until I got to Sapporo. At my happiest. Which is saying something because I've got a family. And I love my family dearly and I do like being in their company. But being an only child, being raised in a family where you're not biologically connected to anybody, I am more than comfortable being by myself. And I'm not asking anybody to be sympathetic towards me. Why would you be sympathetic towards somebody who is experiencing nirvana? I ask you. And my nirvana is being left the fuck alone. Now, I think that's probably why I've spent so many years in Japan. Because you don't get fucked with here. Nobody bothers you here. People are very polite here. They will come and speak to you. They will come and be nice to you. But they don't really fuck with you. Unless they have to. I mean, in Australia, people will come up and chat to you. And, you know, if there is a language barrier, or like in Spain, if a couple of fucking chavs came up to me and started talking to me, I'd just pretend I was Spanish. I think, oh, fuck off. no entiende. So you could just get shut of those fat chavs in Spain. But here, if somebody really wants to communicate with you, they will do it politely. And 9 times out of 10, they won't even bother you because they feel very nervous about approaching a foreigner. So you get left alone here. Again, perfect for me. There are not many... Well, there are expats in Japan, but there are not as many expats in Japan as you will find in other countries. You know, Australia, New Zealand, America, Spain. You can't go outside your own house. You can't swing a dead cat without eating a Brit in those countries. But here, you'd have a job on. I know of 2 Brits in Zushi. One of them I know well, and there's another one floating about. And they're both northerners. There's a lass from Liverpool and I think there's a lad from Sheffield who I've yet to bump into. And there's yours truly as well. But mostly it's Americans, and that's because there's an American base just one stop away on train. So I think that's probably why I plumbed for Japan, because you just get left alone and people leave you to it, and it's great. Now, the thing about being an expat, especially if you are living in a country where English is not the first language, and especially if you're like me, a lazy fuck who, as soon as I arrived here, I fucking turned that switcher in my head in 2005 that said, I'll never learn this language. It's too hard, I'm never going to learn it. A fucking defeatist back then. So I never bothered, and I just sailed through not speaking Japanese. And now I'm doing 3 hours a week. I'm doing 3 hours a week in Japanese classes, and then I'm coming home, and I think I'll study for about 2 or 3 hours by myself every week. So I'm putting 5 or 6 hours in a week. And I've been at it now for a couple of months, and I can see the improvement. Now, rather than thinking, wow, look at the improvement you're making, I'm thinking to myself, why didn't you fucking do this in 2005? But you can't think like that. So for those of you who are going to piss off to foreign countries, if you are going to a foreign country and you are going to one that doesn't speak English as a first language, get on that language quick. Your job opportunities will open up more than anything else if you know their language. So that would be my tip. Don't do what I fucking did. I mean, next year, 2005, I will have been here 20 years. I had a 3.5 year hiatus where I were in Spain. So 17 years on and off in Japan. And I can't even have a conversation in Japanese yet. Thoroughly disgusted with myself. I know a lot of you will be screaming at your iPod going, you lazy fuck. I agree with you. I agree with you. I am a lazy fuck in that respect. But I had to go out and I had to earn some fucking money. I had to work all hours. I've got fucking 3 mouths to feed, to house, to keep warm, to clothe, to get to school. I didn't have time. To be studying Japanese. I tried speaking Japanese while I was out with my wife, and she just said to me, "What are you doing?" And she says, "Look, I'll translate for you." And I just let her do it. Rather than saying, "No, I've got to get this," I let her do it. I just went into that lazy fuck mode and let her do it. So get the language learned. Spain, you can have locked down. You can have Spanish lockdown in 6 months if you're there. Easily. So do that. Now, the thing when you are living in a foreign country where English isn't the first language, you'll fall in with the expats until you do master that language. So you will get friends who are English speakers. That will be your group when you first arrive in that foreign country. Now, the thing about expats here and they are the very worst in Spain. I never used to bother with them in Spain. I had my own business going. I would meet up with customers and take them out kayaking. They would ask me if I wanted to go out with them in the evening. A few of them that were nice and seemed to have their head screwed on right, I'd go out with. I went to a fall concert with one of the lads from Northern Ireland, and it was one of the best concerts I've ever been to. It was fantastic. So you've got stuff like that. Now, when you are in a foreign country with no friends and you fall into this expat groups, you end up being friends with people that you wouldn't be friends with back home. And that's because you are hungry for friendship, especially if you're traveling on your own. I understand that for some people out there. You're by yourself for the first time in a foreign country. It's frightening. Unless you're a fucking maniac like me who is in his element, it's frightening. So you will latch on to expats, and you might be out with these people and look around and go, fucking, there's no way I would be in with this group of people if I were back in my hometown. Now, that is a way of thinking, but the friends are going to be thin on the ground when you arrive somewhere. So what you've got to do is just stick with it. Those people that you've become friends with at the very first few weeks, a few months that you arrive, they will know other people. Other people will come into that group, and then you can sort of branch off with the people that you like the most in that group, the people that you connect with. When I first arrived, the friends that I had were just drinkers because I was a drinker. And I don't have those friends anymore. Those friends have sort of melted into the background. I'm not friends with them anymore. And if I'm honest with myself, I wouldn't have been friends with them anyway. So you've got to keep your eye on that. And especially when you're traveling around the world with this accent, the way I sound, it's amazing how many people don't treat you seriously. They think just because you sound like this, and this is to all northerners out there who are traveling around the world, you might have had the same experience. People just don't seem to treat you the same way. When you're sounding like fucking Wallace from Wallace and Gromit, and you're in a business meeting in Tokyo, and there's other expats there, the fucking sniggers will start. So you've got to get used to that. Or you can clip your accent. I clip mine. My accent is clipped. Obviously not on this podcast, you might have noticed. But yeah, my accent has to be clipped. My accent has to be clipped for my wife. When she was back in Bradford, the last time she was there, 2017, when I were talking with my friends and with my dad, not a clue. She didn't have a clue what I was on about. Didn't have a fucking clue. So for them of you that sound like me, if you want to clip it, clip it. If you're confident in the way you sound, which I am, fuck them, and fuck them all. Because if they're taking the piss out of your accent, they're lacking in their lives. You're not lacking in yours. And another thing, when you come from these towns that are shite, when you come from these towns that are really shite, you'll get people who have never been there that will take the piss out of it. These people that have grown up in these fancy towns around the world who have rich parents, they'll have a little dig at where you're from and how you sound and your upbringing. But what you've got to remember is you've come from there, you've had a start point lower from from where they have started from, and yet you're both at the same level. So the only reason they're taking the piss out of where you started from is because they're a bit jealous that you've travelled a lot further to get to their level. So fuck them as well. Right, now, being an expat, you see these people travelling all around the world, and they've got their Instagrams going now. They've got the Facebook since 2006, 2007, and everybody puts on the best photographs in the camera roll. You should know that. You should know that. I'm guilty of that. I'm not going to put a fucking photo up of me soaked at skin, cycling to work in fucking rain in June, in rainy season. No, I'm gonna put a photo of me cycling to work when it's crystal blue skies. Are you heading out towards Enoshima and there's a snow-capped Mount Fuji in distance? I'm gonna put that photo on. So all these expat photos that you see of everybody having a good time, everybody has a good time. It doesn't matter where you are. I suppose at the moment you could get a good time in Kiev, and that photo would go up on the internet. So us expats are only putting on the best photos. It's not fucking great every day. It's not great every day. But you have more good days than you did from where you came from. And that's all I wanted out of my life, is to have better days somewhere else than where I was. And that's what I've been doing for the last 22 years. Now, the thing when I left in 2002, I left behind me one perfectly healthy parent, and my mother who was, she was teetering. She was teetering with her addictions, shall we say. So now we've fast forwarded 22 years later. Dad's there in England on his own now, old, by himself, and you've got to square that circle, and you've got to be quite harsh about it. What are you going to do? Am I going to pack my 2 kids up and my wife and fly back to Bradford, put my kids in school where his English isn't as good? So maybe had to knock him back a couple of years until he caught up, or maybe a year. I don't know. Then you're dropping them from this heavenly little town that's right on the edge of the Pacific, with a beautiful sea, a nice beach surrounded by mountains and trees and forests, clean air, clean water, good schools, it's safe. And then you're dropping them in to a school in South Bradford, where just down road last year in Huddersfield, this lad got stabbed to death by 2 16-year-olds just because he'd filmed the lad's mother's kitchen with a broken window. All he did, he filmed it on his phone, put it on YouTube. The 2 of the lads saw it and knifed him. Do I take him to that? Just so I can be home and I can look after my dad. Now, I could not do in England what I'm doing here as a job. So I would have to go back to driving wagons again. And in England, I would be on 50% of what I'm on now. I don't think Shima would be able to find a job in Bradford. Her English is good, but what would she do? What would she do in Bradford as a Japanese woman? I can't think of what she could possibly do. And anyway, the last time I were there, she didn't notice it, but I did. We were walking through town in Bradford. So I had 2 kids, and somebody shouted fucking chink. Now, should I have kicked off and got knifed in the liver? Or should I have done what I just did and I ignored it? And that was just a rando person. And it was the one and only time we went into town. And it was towards the end of the trip. So if that's happening when I'm just going into town for like an hour on a Saturday, how many times is it going to happen if I lived there? And I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So because I don't want to do that, you've got to think if your parents are getting old, you've just got to let them age out by themselves. And now I have offered to go fly over to England, get my dad, come back over here for 6 weeks, and he can spend the whole summer here with me and the kids. He's got somewhere to live. He'll have his own bedroom. He can get on the bikes. He can go to the beach. He can go walking. I'm going to be here. The kids will be here. My wife will be here. Not having it. He's not having it. So every year I've got to fly back to England and spend some time with my dad because he does not want to come over here. And fair enough, when my mother were alive, I mean, she spent 12 years going down with dementia and he had to look after her. That's fair enough. But when she died, a big part of me thought, fucking brilliant, he can come over to Japan. And he said no straight away. I mean, he was 79 at the time and COVID was going on. So we sat COVID out. And then last year when I went home, he'd had a couple of falls and his back's all over the place now. But he'd be able to sit on a plane for 9 or 10 hours and get over here, but he's frightened to death of having an accident while we're here. So he won't come over here. So you can't just think, if you're going to be an expat, you can't just think of the next 5 or 6 years. You've got to think, if you're going to go all in, you've got to think, right, my parents are going to get old soon. If you're an only child like me, what do? Do you go back, look after them? I might have done if I'd have been single with no kids. I might have done, but I'd have been pissed off. I'd have been so pissed off. My mark of failure, it's a low bar, but a mark of failure, I have failed in life if I have to live in England again. That is my failure. If I could live my days out in a foreign country, I've won. I've won in life. That is my bar. If I have to go back and live in England, live in Bradford, I will be so fucking depressed. I will be so depressed. Especially as when I was said before, when I was knee high to a grasshopper, my thing was, I just need to get out of here. So that is my failure if I have to go back. So for them of you, I'll repeat myself to sum up. For them of you who are thinking of doing it, do it. I've never had so much fun as I have on the road, or I have living in a foreign country. And talking about those friends that you'd never be friends with at home, you do find the diamonds in the rough. There are a couple of mates here that I don't see as much as I should do, but they're there. And they're cut from the same cloth. Fucking pretty crappy childhoods. They've got here and they've done something. Whereas you get those rich fucks that have come here and they're all this moaning about shit because they had it better when they were living in whatever city they were living in with the rich parents. The rich parents give them this fantastic life and yeah, they're struggling now. But them that have come from fucking shit, all you've got to do is give them a sunny day, a nice wife, and they're happy as a pig in shit. They're not bothered about money. Who's the fuck about money? We never had money in the first place. But I'm saying, if you're cleaning toilets in a shit town, it's shit. If you're cleaning toilets in the south of France or in Asia or in Japan, it's shit, but you're somewhere fantastic. So you can still do a shit job, but it can be made better by where you are and where you're going to spend your downtime. So get out of those cities, get to the airports and fucking leave. But remember, your parents are going to get old. I will see you next week.